Good evening, members, and good evening, members of the public. And can I also welcome anyone watching on YouTube? Welcome to our planning meeting today, the 15th of November. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Bowers, who is being substituted by Councillor Hensman. I haven't heard from Councillor Wrench. I can only assume he's been slightly delayed. So we'll wait and see. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda, having regard to the Code of Conduct of members? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I declare a non-pecuniary interest in agenda item 5B 22/0822 full, Horizon 120 Business Park, Great Notley? I'm Vice Chairman of Great Notley Parish Council, and a response was sent in by them, but the minutes of the Parish Council meeting on the 17th of October reflect that I was not part of that decision-making or indeed in the room, so therefore I shall remain, debate and vote on the application. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Miss Wilson.
Yes, can I declare an NPI on item number 5A, because I have very recently become a member of Coggeshall Parish Council.
Thank you. Are you going to remain and vote? Are you going to stay and vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No? Thank you. Item 3, the minutes. We do not have the minutes of the 1st of November this evening. They will come to the next meeting. Item 4, public question time. We have no general questions under question time, as those that wish to make a statement make it prior to each application. Before I move on, Councillor Wrench, do you have any interest to declare?
No, apologies for my lateness,
Yep.
but no, I don't have any
That's
interest.
fine.
Thank you.
Fully understood, thank you. That brings us on to item 5, our planning applications. The first application is application 5A, application number 2100671 full, development land, East Street, Coggeshall. This can be found on pages 6 to 48, and I do have a speaker on this application. Can I just tell everyone that wishes to make a statement this evening, you do get 3 minutes and they are timed. The person wishing to make a statement on this application is Councillor Jeff Heaton. He is speaking on behalf of Coggeshall Parish Council. Would you like to come to the table and make your statement? Thank you.
Good evening. We oppose this application. I'll explain why the number of houses needs to be around 15 as per our neighbourhood plan, because this number wasn't plucked from thin air. I'll start with the reference in the committee report to the western boundary of the development site being part of the Essex Way. The Essex Way is an important amenity and tourist attraction, and its Coggeshall section is walked by thousands of locals and visitors every year. As you follow it eastwards through Coggeshall, you pass 3 Grade 1 listed buildings, Grange Barn, St Nicholas Chapel and Coggeshall Abbey. As you turn north after the Abbey, you have horse grazing fields on your right and the remains of the Abbey fish ponds of scheduled monument on your left. Finally, just before you reach East Street, you have the development site on your right, which is currently an open field. The views it offers make it a high amenity site. Our Neighbourhood Plan Committee thought long and hard about how preserving the important feeling of open space and views along the Essex Way could be reconciled with developing the site. Our idea was that there should be a reasonably sized open space between the Essex Way and the development to act as a green buffer. The remainder of the site would accommodate around 15 homes. We discussed this at a meeting with Alan Massow in June 2019, and the figure of around 15 was agreed. This was in the context of Coggeshall's overall contribution to Braintree's housing target. Since that time, both the Coggeshall Neighbourhood Plan and the Braintree Local Plan, which also contain the 15 houses figure, have been adopted. The committee report euphemistically states, the increase of 5 dwellings over that stated within policy does reduce the level of policy compliance. What this actually means is that the 20 houses proposal does not comply with policy. There would have to be a compelling reason for a proposal that does not comply with the local or neighbourhood plan to be approved. The committee report believes that the current absence of a 5-year land supply is such a reason because it engages para 11D of the NPPF. The report states, officers have concluded that the adverse effects of granting permission do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Consequently, it's recommended that the planning permission is granted for the proposed development. We strongly disagree. In our view, the adverse impacts of building 20 houses would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The proposal would cause real environmental harm to the Essex Way and reduce the social enjoyment of the thousands of walkers who use it. The local and development plan figure of 15 houses should be given its proper weight in the planning balance and upheld. I urge you to reject this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Heaton. We have no other speakers on this application, so we'll go to the presentation, which is going to be made by Lisa. Good evening, and thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. This is a full application for the construction of 20 dwellings with...
I don't think your microphone's working properly. No.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. This is a full planning application for the construction of 20 dwellings with associated works and new vehicular and pedestrian access to East Street. And the application site is land at East Street, Coggeshall. Here is an aerial photograph showing the site in relation to Coggeshall. So you've got the village centre along here, East Street running in this east to west location, and the application site is this roughly rectangular parcel here. So you can see it fronts onto East Street, has residential development to the north, the east and the west, and this is the public right-of-way, the Essex Way, that runs along its western boundary. It's open to the south. So the location plan here, again, you can see the extent of the application site in red, residential to the north, east and west, and the open aspect to the south. And again, you can see how the Essex Way runs to the western side of the site. Turning to the site plan here, officers have worked extensively with the applicant to secure this layout, so we're content that it's a high quality layout and design. So we've got plot 1 here, which fronts onto East Street itself, has a separate access and detached garaging, and that building line follows the line of established residential development on East Street. Then got one vehicular access for the rest of the site, and you've got this curved formation with dwellings principally fronting out onto the open space. The development would provide for 12 market dwellings and 8 affordable units. The affordable units are these sited to the north here. So turning to the application dwellings now, this is plot 1. So this is a painted brickwork with a clay tile. And you can see the 3D image here. So it's this plot here, and it's the same dwelling type for this corner plot and this corner plot here. And you can see how the dwelling's been designed with an active fenestration there as it turns the corner of those plots. Plots 2 and 3 here, again you can see they're painted brickwork and render, so painted brickwork here and render. And again, apologies, in terms of where they are, there's these two semi-detached pair here, so this would be the view, one of the views you'd be getting from that public right-of-way. Plots 5 and 10 here are painted brickwork and a render in this pale pink colour, and again you can see them here on the 3D image. It would be these plots here and here. No, apologies. Here, sorry, and this plot here. So again here we're turning to plot 6 and 7 now. You can see them on the 3D image, and they're these two plots here. Again, you can see they benefit from these single-storey side garaging. Plot 8 now is a 2.5-storey property. This would be sorry. So in half-storey property, sorry, and this is in a pale green colour render and painted brickwork. And again, we're talking about this property here that's fronting onto that southern aspect for the site, and this has a attached to bay carport. And again, on this 3D image, you can see the depth of reveal for the windows, and that's a feature that we're keen to encourage, and is to be secured via condition. Plot 11 here is another detached property in painted brickwork, and you can see it on the 3D image. So we're referring to this property here, and again you can see the green plot 12 just sited beyond. So there we are, plot 12, a painted brickwork and render with the clay tile. And again, this is just now another 3D image, so looking south, so you can see plot 12, 11 and this plot beyond. Here we've got plot 13 and 14, which are render and a painted brickwork. These are two of the affordable units. And again, here on the 3D image, it would be these plots as they turn that corner there. So these 4 plots are also painted brickwork and render. So brickwork to the flank and a painted and the render to the front and rear elevation. These are for the other affordable units, and you can see them here on the elevation. So it's these 2 pairs up here. And lastly, we've got plot 19 and 20, which are render with this brick banding detail, and these are the other 2 affordable units. So again, here on the 3D image, we're referring to these 2 units here. A range of different parking provision across the site. So the affordable units, the 8 affordable units, and these 2 market dwellings here benefit from driveway parking to this side or to the rear, here and here. Otherwise, there's a 4-bay garage, carport, which is located here, which serves the 2 adjacent properties. A triple carport for this unit here and plot 1, and then some double garaging for plots 11 and 12 here. Garage provision for plots 6 and 7, single garage, which we could see on that 3D image. And then across the site, visitor parking. So there's 2 parking spaces here to the north and here to the south. So officers are content that they are well placed throughout the site and discreet in their siting. Turning to the street scene, we've got, this is the East Street scene, so you've got plot 1 there to the right hand side, and that follows that established building line, and then you would get glimpses of the other dwellings that sit behind that established and retained landscaping to the East Street. This top street scene is this southern elevation looking back to the north then, so you've got plot 10 here to the side, and then extending down you can see the natural lie of the land. You can see the rear of plot 1, and then these sort of turning plots along here. And then to the bottom, this street scene here is the view you would get from the Essex Way, so again looking sort of east. So you've got the flank of plot 1, and then you can see the frontage of plot 2, 3 and 4. There is some tree and hedge removal to be proposed to accommodate the development, so that is hashed here in red. So that results in the removal of 4 category C trees and a category C hedge, and as detailed within the officer report, officers content that compensatory planting can be achieved on site to outweigh the harm by that removal. The blue are the retention and protection of the other trees on the site, and again this bottom plan here really just shows how those existing trees are to be retained and how the development's been designed to accommodate that. The application has been submitted with a detailed landscaping plan that the Council's landscaping section are content with. It's quite difficult to see on here, but it proposes a fairly uniform approach across the site. So hornbeam hedging at the front and along here to strengthen that planting along East Street, and again sort of hedging as it sort of extends around the rest of the site to sort of tie it all together. A number of trees are proposed across the site, so some street trees in addition and some ornamental trees within that street scene. This also details the work to the public right-of-way here, so this will be extended in width to 2 metres, and it will be laid with self-binding gravel. And just turning to some photographs here, so this is now a view taken from East Street looking east, just showing you really the existing dwellings that front onto East Street, so you can see the style, the general form and the materials, how the development sort of has drawn reference to what's in the locality. So here a render with that brick banding and accommodation in the roof. And again here, this is the dwelling that lies most adjacent to the development site. Again, you can see the form and the materials. So here is the development site we'll be looking at. Here's an existing access into it, and you can just sort of see that frontage there with East Street. So again, here is the existing access into the site, and you can see here the access entrance into that Essex Way. A photograph here taken from the Essex Way, so you can see the existing open fencing that forms the boundary with the Essex Way in this development site. The northern boundary with East Street, and you can see that eastern boundary in the distance, and the south of the site there. A view here taken, this fence forms the southern boundary, existing planting and existing trees within the site. And again, another view really from the same angle, just looking over to the site, so you can see sort of that change in land level. This photograph is taken from within the development site. You can see we're looking now east, so here is that eastern boundary, southern boundary, and that north with East Street. Another view taken from within the site, looking west now. So this hedgerow here, which is very established, forms the other side of the Essex Way. So the Essex Way running where my cursor is, this existing tree that's within the application site, that northern boundary and the eastern boundary here. So this is the landscaping that's to be retained. A view from East Street now, just looking east. So here is the planting that would be removed to accommodate the access and visibility displays. And again, a view now just looking west, which shows the existing landscaping which would be retained. Now there is a member update for you this evening, firstly in regards to conditions, so it's not on this slide, so apologies, it's a verbal update, and it's in regards to condition 3, which relates to archaeology. So we're just suggesting a very slight change to the wording for clarification. So in this instance, the applicant has already submitted their written scheme of investigation. So Place Services have reviewed that and have suggested this condition which we've imposed, but we're suggesting a change to the first clause of that. So it would read that no development or preliminary groundworks can commence until a mitigation strategy, and there we're looking to add for archaeology. So just to clarify what that condition is really seeking to achieve. And the other update for you this evening is in regards to the Section 106 legal agreement. So we've now had comments back from Essex County Council. They have requested a contribution towards early years and childcare. So you can see here the figure that they're seeking to add for the additional 1.8 places that will be generated by the development. They're also seeking a contribution towards primary education. So again, the figure outlined here. We're looking to add to accommodate those additional places generated by the development, and a further contribution towards libraries, so £1,556 towards libraries. So by way of a summary, the site is located within the defined settlement boundary. It is an allocated site for residential purposes within the local plan and the neighbourhood plan. As detailed within the committee report, it is acknowledged that the proposed numbers do exceed that set out within the relevant site allocation policies, but the actual numbers stated within the policies is not fixed and is stated to be indicative. In terms of the layout and design, officers have worked with the applicant over a number of months, are content that this would result in a high quality development. In regards to the housing mix, there would be some conflict with the strategic housing market assessment, with a shortfall in the number of 1 and 2 bed units at the site. However, given that the development only proposes 12 market dwellings, the actual shortfall in real numbers is limited. Otherwise, the development complies with the policy in regards to 40% affordable housing. The development would result in no harm to heritage, would be acceptable for future occupiers and neighbours. The removal of the trees in the hedgerow is regrettable, though, as detailed, officers feel that this can be appropriately mitigated by replacement planting at the site. Matters in regards to the highway are acceptable, and parking provision across the site is also acceptable. and matters in regards to ecology, flooding is also deemed to be acceptable. So in terms of the adverse impact here for the planning balance, the adverse impacts relate to that housing mix for the market dwellings with that shortfall in number of 1 and 2 bed units, and also adverse impacts regarding the removal of that existing landscape, so that group of trees and the hedgerow. In terms of public benefits, we feel the development complies with the development plan, being within the development boundary and allocated for residential purposes. The development would result in the delivery of market and affordable housing. And in respect of access to services and facilities, the site is considered to be in a sustainable location with convenient access to public transport. Furthermore, we consider there economic and social benefits and benefits associated with biodiversity net gain. And therefore, our conclusion is that taking into account the above, while there are conflicts with the development plan which weigh against the proposal, it's considered that the proposal complies with the development plan when taken as a whole. And officers consider that there are no material considerations that indicate that decision should be made other than in accordance with the development plan. So having regard to the adverse impacts and benefits outlined, we conclude that the adverse impacts of granting permission do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the framework as a whole. And our recommendation this evening is that permission be granted subject to the Section 106 and conditions as set out, including those additional contributions towards education and libraries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Councillor Mrs Wilson.
Yes, my first point is quite basic, I know, but the proposal was originally, this proposal is for 20 houses, which doesn't apply with the approved Coggeshall Neighbourhood Plan allocation of around 15 properties. Is actually 33% greater. Essex County Council Highways letter of the 7th of July, comment 2A, requires a 2-metre wide footpath to be provided from the proposed site across to the west to join with the existing footpath provision on East Street. The current proposals do not include for this, and land acquisition agreements from properties fronting East Street would be necessary to achieve this. I mean, there is no footpath further down from where you were showing your pictures. A separate pedestrian and vehicular access serving plot number 1 is proposed. You didn't mention that on your thing, but it looks as if one of the houses has got its own access onto East Street, and I've printed off this, which actually shows that you could actually join up with the main entrance rather than have two. Users of these access proposals could cause unnecessary confusion, conflict with vehicles and pedestrians using East Street, and also could obstruct required visibility display requirements. I see no reason why this property should be accessed directly from the road. The application does not include a traffic impact assessment to demonstrate that the existing highway has sufficient capacity to accommodate the proposal, along with the permitted Bovis Vistry development of 300 houses currently under construction further along the east of East Street. Current parking along East Street is slowly encroaching from the direction of the Co-op, the BT Exchange and the recreation ground eastwards towards the proposed development. In the event this proposal goes ahead, then consideration should be given to imposing parking restrictions on East Street. Topographical survey information indicates the site is about 1 metre higher than the road level of East Street. The proposals for the site access do not show how this level difference is accommodated, e.g. earthquakes or a retaining wall or something. The loss of hedgerows and trees at the site access is regrettable but unavoidable. However, it must have been anticipated in the approved neighbourhood plan in allocating the site for residential development. Nevertheless, imposing planning conditions to ensure an approved landscaping proposal along with a strategy for future watering and maintenance should address this. Thank you. Quite long, and I've got a funny throat. But
Did you want to come back about the footpath, because it is in the highways?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those comments. Yeah, in regards to the footpath, if I can just reshare my screen, if that's possible. So here, obviously, it's the existing footpath onto East Street, so existing footpath there. When if you look at the Red Edge application site area, you can see that it does extend over to there. Bear with me. Here, so it allows the provision of that footway. And then when you look at the proposed site plan, you can see that they are proposing this footpath that would link into that. So I think the footpath would be proposed. They are proposing that this footway would link from the development site into the existing footway.
I'm sure that's fine. Sorry. But you would have to purchase land. There is absolutely no footpath from quite a long way down to the co-op, which is the way a lot of people are going to go from that site. And it would have to be people's gardens that are used. And the BT, there's a BT thing there with a lot of vans and things. There's no footpath there at all. I mean, there's plenty of footpath on the pictures you showed, I'll grant you.
Sorry?
It says to connect to the existing footway.
Oh. But in the report, it says 2 metre wide footpath to be provided at the site frontage. Is that?
So I think what Lisa was saying was, so the recommendation is requiring a 2 metre footway at the site frontage from the site access to the west to join with the existing footway provision on East Street. So the existing footway provision we're taking to be the footway that Lisa showed in the photograph in front of the neighbour's property. The application site, the red line, extends and connects to the existing footway. So within the application site, the footway can be connected. So that, so far as we're concerned, is complying with the Essex Highways recommendation, which is saying the footway is to be extended to connect to the existing provision on East Street. It's not asking us to connect or do anything further along East Street. It's asking us to connect to that existing footway.
Well, it's quite commonsensical. If you're going to walk from the site into the village, and we're only talking a matter of yards, there is no footpath. I know there is up near the site, and when you go east, but there's nothing coming into the village. And that would require people's gardens to be purchased.
Yeah, so, well, so the recommendation from the Highway Authority isn't requiring anything further in terms of connection onwards from the site. It's only asking for a connection to the existing footway. It's a relatively small development. I don't think it is, if we're potentially looking at purchasing the fronts of people's gardens and securing that seems to be of a scale which is disproportionate to the scale of developments proposed here. Wouldn't be reasonable in terms of the SIL regulations. And like I said, from our point of view, it's not something the Highway Authority have recommended or support. So it's not part of the recommendation. So we're satisfied that the recommendation is looking to secure the works which the Highway Authority have recommended as being necessary. And that's as far as we feel it needs to be taken in terms of this development. If there is a desire to see a footway along towards the rest of the village, then that could be pursued through the Highway Authority if they consider that to be appropriate. But it's not something which we consider will be necessary as part of this development.
If you look at 7.81 on page 15, Councillor, it says that it's to extend it to a point where they can then cross the road to join the footpath on the other side of the road, which is quite clear. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think the overall design of the site is, of the housing and the layout is just about acceptable. Though I very carefully looked at this and online as well, and I take the point of the parish council that 15 is what they expected. It's what it says in the local plan. It's what it says in the neighbourhood plan. Having said that, I don't think there's enough additional density there for us to say it's too much. Having said that, of course, we are in a difficult position because of the housing land supply, and it's not the fault of the district council. I make that plain from the outset, but it actually says in the agenda that our local plan policies are out of date. That's what it says, because we don't have a 5-year supply. Well, we adopted our local plan 4 months ago. I mean, it is a ridiculous situation the government's put us and many other local authorities in on this housing land supply. I thought I'd just mention that. How can it be out of date when we adopted 4 months ago? I think the housing mix is a bit of a concern. So I don't think the officer explicitly mentioned it, but there's actually a quarter of the properties are 5-bedroom. Those are big houses, five-bed houses. There's a quarter, and I think that element of the mix is a bit of concern. Whereas we were looking for some smaller houses. Yes, you're going to get some bigger ones, but some more smaller ones would have been good. I'm not entirely convinced on the tree planting, the street trees. I thought what the government were requiring was street trees along all the main roads. Well, given that this is a sort of a circular spine road, if you like, that I couldn't see planting all the way around. First of my questions, I believe this is going to be a private road, non-adopted. Therefore, I think we're going to have to watch very carefully what comes in on the lighting condition. There's a good lighting condition in there, but what a private road lights were going to look like compared to what Essex County Council would have put up for an adopted road could be completely different. And if I could make a plea on that point, so many of the developments which are now going up have floodlit show homes that were not consented and up-down lights in all the houses. 50% of the porch lights are shining straight up into the sky. It's a complete waste of energy. It is fashionable. It doesn't actually achieve what we want in policy terms, and it wastes energy. GP capacity, £9,000. That'll sort out the lack of the deficit in healthcare locally. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because we've been over it many times. On the Essex Way, yes, very important. I think just about enough separation there that I don't think we could hang an objection on that. But I wanted, like Councillor Wilson, to ask more questions about the frontage. So the officers showed where the trees are going to come out, although I would say, yet again, they're lower quality trees apparently. Well, not as far as I'm concerned, they're not. I've been past there numerous times. I checked on the latest Google. We just looked at photographs. They do not look like lower quality trees to me. I think that's developer speak. My concern is what's going to happen. So, as Councillor Wilson says, it's inevitable we're going to lose some of the access because of the displays. My concern is what happens to the rest further along East Street to the east. The visualisations also seem to show gaps, but currently that is a solid hedge. There's very few gaps in it. Is it absolutely nailed down that all of that retained hedge from where the losses end all the way to the far eastern edge of the site are going to be retained? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Looks like it on the plan.
Thank you. Just picking up on, I think your first question was to do with whether this is going to be an adopted road, so it would remain a private road, and as you know, there's a lighting condition on there, so take on board what you're saying about show homes and uplighters, flood lighting, take that on board. Just going to check in terms of conditions for the frontage landscaping, so you're right, a stretch of planting is to be removed, and the rest of it to the east from there is to be retained, so no works retained to that. I was just checking that there's a condition on there to ensure that they retain for a moment. I'm informed it's condition 17. So condition 17 relates to the requirement for a tree protection plan to be submitted and approved in writing with officers. So the retention of those trees is secured under that.
say something. Please do.
Yeah, just on the point about the trees, I mean, Lisa's made the point in the presentation about the trees being retained to the east. I'm not sure whether the images with the street scenes were perhaps slightly misleading. I think they've sort of ghosted some of the trees across the frontage. So rather than just showing a solid band of trees with just perhaps a little bit of roof appearing above, I think the street scenes have been designed to make it appear there are gaps, perhaps, to allow an impression of the development and how it's going to relate to the trees in front. So I think that's maybe what's caused you to be concerned. But certainly in terms of the arboricultural reports that have been provided, they're very clear, and so are we, that the trees, other than those necessary to be removed for the access, to be retained. As Lisa said, the tree protection plan will make sure that suitable measures are put in place before development commence to make sure they're in place. And I think, as Lisa also said during the presentation, there's also additional strengthening and planting proposed as part of the landscaping to the frontage as well. So if there are any existing gaps in there at the moment, or anywhere where there's stuff that needs to be strengthened, that can be covered as part of the landscaping.
Madam Chairman, if you approve it, could I just suggest then, could we add an informative, just to emphasise that? That the reason I'm concerned about it is most developers rip out the entire frontage because they want to show off their development and floodlight their show homes. And we've seen it time and time again. On this site, it's quite unusual that most of the frontage is going to be kept in terms of the hedge, which is really important. And in fact, if you're standing there, the road curves round slightly, so it does allow you to do that because that curve helps the sight line. So just suggesting we could have an informative just to
stating
strengthen
the
that,
only
say,
trees that can be removed are those for the site access.
Yeah.
Is that fine? All right. The only trees that can be removed, we've put them in on the informative of those to provide the site access.
Yeah,
is that fine?
Just on the point, sorry, just so we're clear, because we're looking to approve the landscaping scheme that's been submitted. So there's details of landscaping, additional planting along the frontage there. So I just want to make that clear. I don't want to potentially misled you, Councillor Abbott, that we could have a condition where we're going to have additional landscaping details to follow. But I take the point. We can certainly have an informative to cover that point about the tree removal.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Mrs. Beavers.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points, if I may, and then just ask a brief question. I mean, 23 letters of objection, and actually, when you kind of take them one for one and kind of knowing the area as well, there is a lot of credibility, I think, in what's being said, particularly the bullet that says harm to the rural character and setting of the Essex Way. And I just wonder what's got us from 15, which was kind of the figure that was originally spoken about, and obviously in the Coggeshall Neighbourhood Plan, which, so much hard work went into that, to the 20, because it just seems to me to be, a crazy situation where we're planting trees to enhance a development, whereas, this is the Essex Way, a beautiful piece of open countryside, and actually we're building not to enhance it because we're putting more in. And I mean, my personal view is, and I do take the point that Councillor Abbott's made, it's going to be pretty hard to defend the extra 5, but we're ripping into a beautiful part of the countryside, and we don't have to do that. And I think that's just what I find frustrating. And I just wonder, within the pre-app, how we got from this situation of 15, which was more socially acceptable and acceptable to the landscape, to 20, which just seems to me to be, pushing it, quite frankly. But I accept where we are. But I would just like to know that answered. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, so just looking back, looking at the local plan, so I think it's important to note that in terms of the local plan, we don't actually allocate a number against the development. So we list a potential site capacity, but it's not a policy as in we're saying as a matter of policy you can't develop more than 15 houses. Just as of note, with the local plan, it says at submission of a local plan 2025, capacity was established at 25 initially for completion, forecast for 2021. Full application was received for 20 dwellings, which is obviously what we're considering now, pending consideration. Coggeshall Neighbourhood Plan includes the site for around 15 dwellings. Subject to obtaining permission, the site capacity may increase to 20. So I think the reason for reading that out is, initially it was identified for 25. There's been a lot of discussion prior to the application being submitted and since the application has been submitted. to try and settle on a number where officers are comfortable, and numerous revisions have been made to layout, architectural style and so on. I think in the round, obviously officers are comfortable. We certainly acknowledge that there is conflict with the neighbourhood plan. The neighbourhood plan had an aspiration or expectation of a lower number, but in terms of the scheme that's being presented, the offset that there is to the Essex Way we think is acceptable. We don't think it would be a reason for refusal. We're comfortable with the layout overall, so that's how we've arrived at where we are. But I think hopefully you can see that the capacity has been considered over quite a long period, a number of different stages. The application tonight is potentially the last stage in that process, but it has bounced around starting at 25 initially.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Mrs Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I think there's a lot of positives about this application. It's an allocated site, so that's a good start as far as we're concerned. I like the design. I think the quality is good. The mix of colours is very suitable for Coggeshall. I'm quite happy about that, and we have some affordable homes. There are no objections from the statutory consultees apart from the parish council, and I'll come on to that in just a moment. The housing mix, it's a bit of a shame that it's weighted in favour of the larger homes. It would have been nice to have had maybe one or two more sort of 1 or 2 bedroom houses, but I have to take the officer's comment that the shortfall is very minimal, in relation to the site as a whole. So I don't think that's anything that we can really get a handle on too much. Can I just ask Lisa to clarify one thing? Councillor Wilson asked about the second access. Is it for plot 1? Could you, which I don't think she had an answer to. Can we just clarify that? Is there a separate access for that one?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a separate access to plot 1. So plot 1 will have its own vehicular access. It's got driveway and carport provision, and then the rest of the site are accessed via that one access that's further to the west.
Right. And is that because of plot 1, because of where it is, because it's on the corner, so to speak?
I'm not really sure why the design rationale, but I think that's just what was presented to us. So I think it's just really to provide a bit of an active frontage to East Street. So that dwelling is obviously, because of the landscaping, it's more assertive on there. But yeah, it does have a separate access.
Okay. So and highways obviously didn't have any problem with that, did they?
No, there's no objection from highways. Sorry, I was just trying to assist. So in terms of the frontage of plot 1, I think it's widely accepted that in terms of vehicle behaviour and driver behaviour, if you have properties which are fronting onto a road, then it encourages drivers to drive more responsibly because they feel they're in more of a built-up area. If you have properties which are all facing inwards and you've got nothing facing out, and if you had even more vegetation along the front, you potentially have got an access which is coming out onto East Street. Drivers are going to feel less inclined to behave as if they're in a residential area. So I think in part of it will be urban design, part of it is probably to assist with highway behaviour and driver behaviour. But yeah, in answer to your question, Councillor Spray, highways are happy with that arrangement.
Okay, thank you for that. I get it. That's fine. I think to go back to the parish council, they have some very good points, and I think I have to agree that having 20 houses rather than 15, it sort of isn't in the spirit of the neighbourhood plan, but there is also clearly, obviously, room on the site to take 20 dwellings, and I would not be at all sure that point alone would be sufficient reason to object to or refuse the application, to be honest. There is room for it, but I can understand the parish council feeling a bit sore that, having gone to the trouble of putting that point, particularly in the neighbourhood plan, that you've got 5 more than they would like to see. But I think because of the way it is worded in the neighbourhood plan and in the local plan, I think we would struggle to defend any refusal based on that point. And the layout I like, and I think it's perfectly acceptable. So all in all, Chairman, I think the advantages certainly outweigh any disadvantages that the objectors may see. And on that basis, Chairman, I will move officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mrs Sprain, you are including in that the Essex County Council 106 requirements and the changing of the wording in condition 3 on page 36.
Yes,
Thank you very much. Does that find a seconder? It does. Councillor Mann. Councillor Mann, I've got Councillor Swear next, and I'll come back to you. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Swear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could I just ask officers to clarify a few things after a couple of comments? I agree with my colleagues about the comments with regards to the quality of the proposed build overall. I do welcome condition 20 about EV charging to every household. I think that's really important. Condition 24, I just wondered if officers could tell me what the biodiversity net gain is of the percentage on the site, and will it all be on the site? And also, I noticed that the comments were made with regards to pre-app. Did the officers discuss with the developers the possibility of adding renewable energy, as in solar power, but not panels, but in roofline, in order to create a good quality design? And I wondered at the same time whether they asked the developers about water-saving measures and also renewable heating for these houses, considering their location. And part of my reason for mentioning all of this is actually falling in line with our climate policy, and I'm hoping that that the planning will start working more in conjunction with our planning policy that we've set. I'm sorry, our climate policy.
Thank you, Councillor Swear. Do you want to come back on those before I move on to Councillor Mann?
Thank you. Yeah, in regards to the biodiversity net gain, that's detailed within the report on page 24. So they have submitted a calculation tool which demonstrates how biodiversity net gain can be achieved, and that is going to be achieved on site. So officers are content with that, and that's, as I sort of summarised within the presentation, give positive weight to that provision. In terms of the sustainability argument, in terms of solar panels, etc., the development would be a sort of that fabric first approach. So as I'm aware, there haven't been discussions in regards to providing solar panels and similar lights on these particular dwellings. I think some of the rationale for that is to do with the design of the dwellings and sort of ensuring they're really high quality to sort of this setting of the conservation area.
Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, this is, I think, on balanced decision, but I agree with previous speakers that the benefits do quite clearly, in a tilted balance, I think, outweigh the harms. I agree with colleagues who've said that we would be hard pressed, I think, to turn this down on 20 houses. I mean, the key question is, can the site take this quantum of development? And I think it can, and has demonstrated that it can. And although, I mean, this is by no means a perfect application, I agree that there isn't a sufficient accumulation of harms, I think, to overcome the benefits. For example, I agree with Councillor Abbott that there is sufficient separation from the Essex Way. I mean, Coggeshall rightly proud of this stretch of the Essex Way, but I think, again, it would be very difficult to demonstrate the degree of harm that the Parish Council are suggesting might be there. So, all in all, Chair, I'm happy to second, as I have already done.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree with much of what's been said already, but I won't necessarily go over the comments, just to reiterate the fact that this is an allocated site. Admittedly, there have been discussions about the quantum that can be accommodated, but I agree with Councillor Mann that this clearly can accommodate 20 houses, although it wasn't what was in the neighbourhood plan. But I think with our 5-year housing land supply position, we would be have difficulty justifying refusal on the basis of 15 houses rather than 20. I actually think I agree with the officers. I think this is actually a high quality scheme. I think the layout has enabled the preservation of that vegetated frontage to East Street to remain, which I think is a positive. I actually really like the design. I think it's quite nice to have a sort of modern design which also reflects the heritage of Coggeshall. I think the materials to be used will be very important. And I think sort of the details that have been referred to in the report will produce a really quite a high quality scheme. So I think that really is quite a positive. I note comments about the Essex Way. Obviously, it is an extremely well used footpath for the residents of Coggeshall. There is going to be an improvement, obviously, to that footpath in that there will be this gravel bound surface. And also, I think so many of these footpaths, they get sort of hemmed in by fencing, and it's actually just not particularly appealing. I think the way the layout has been designed, including with those trees that we saw, that's actually going to, it probably will actually, it may even enhance that section of the path. So, can I just ask a couple of questions? First, I think the colour of the dwellings is going to be really important. Is that covered by any of the conditions? So are you required to see the colour palette? There's a really interesting presentation at the Dedham Vale recently, several years ago, about the importance of colour in the countryside, and particularly within Coggeshall. I think it's very important that we get the actual tone of that colour right. There was mention from Anglia Water, I think it is, about the sewers might be crossing the site. Would that normally be something that would be covered by condition? Not sure whether that would be or not. And also, just, I'm sorry to go back to the footway, but just, could you just clarify, the Highways said they would like a minimum 2 metre wide footway at the site access to the east at a point where you could successfully cross the road to the footway on the other side of the road. And I can't remember seeing that on the plans, but could you just clarify that for me? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just picking up on those points. So in terms of materials, condition 5, we've added, requires the samples of those, so we'll have full details of those. So just leading on from that, condition 6 is asking for a bit more details, not necessarily with the colour point you're picking up on, but some of those design details about the depth and reveal, sort of window, door, verge details, so that all sort of ties in with that sort of finished appearance. In terms of sewerage, that would be covered ordinarily by a building regs, but happy to add an informative on if you think that would be appropriate. And then the point around, I'm not sure I completely understood the question around the footpath.
So just, I think, Highways, just from paragraph, page 15, wasn't it? I think they indicate that there needs to be a section of footway going, on 15, going east, not, so in other words, out of the village, to a point at which you can then cross the road to get onto the footway on the other side. Is that?
This is to the west.
Well, I think
to the west to join the existing footway provision on East Street.
I think two sections of footway. I think a minimum 2 metre wide footway from the site access to the west, and then semicolon another minimum 2 metre wide footway at the site access to the east. Am I right in? Have I got that right?
If I can, if you look at, I don't know if it'd be helpful to share the plan again, but if not, so if you're looking at that site entrance, there's a footpath both sides of the access. I think primarily to allow plot 1 then would be able to walk from their property on the footpath, cross over. So that I can share it if helpful, but there is a footpath either side of the access.
Okay, thanks. No need to show the plan. Thanks.
Okay, finished. Thank you. Councillor Hensman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My interest is in the public transport, and the statement says that it's easy access. Is there a definition of what easy access is? Because whilst there's a historic bus stop on East Street just beside the development, that's not been used, I believe, since the bypass went in, and the buses now go up through Church Street and on up out through Con Road to join the precarious junction at the top. So I reckon it's a good just shy of half a mile to the nearest bus stop, and therefore to try and encourage people to use alternative transport, they'd have a mile, and especially in inclement weather, they'd probably not go that way. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the bus stops, I think the bus stops that we've calculated in terms of the distances are those ones within the centre of the village, so on Market Hill and Church Street. So I think sort of nothing sort of written down to sort of quantify what is an easy walk or reasonable walk. But I think in terms of looking at those distances and sort of, there is footpath access there. It's not particularly steep. Those sort of considerations, I think, on overall officers consider that would be a reasonable route and distance for occupiers to be able to access that provision.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, before we vote, could we just clarify what we've added? Because
Yes.
I don't think the motion included my suggested informative.
No, it didn't. I'm sorry, but I have got it now.
Thank you. And if the
I will
mover and seconder
I
are
will
happy.
repeat it when.
And just to follow up on very briefly on Councillor Schwartz's point, totally agree about the lack of renewables again, but as we know where we are on policy terms in planning. But interestingly, earlier this week was the most recent meeting of the Essex Climate Commission, which we're both on, and there is apparently a discussion taking place with planning officers across the whole of Essex about how we could achieve passive house standard, one of the levels of passive house standard, which would in some instances include renewables via building regulations, as opposed to going through the planning side. So I'm hoping that we might get there in the end on this, although currently it's very frustrating.
Yes, we can't do anything at the moment, that's the problem. Well, it has been moved by Councillor Mrs Spray, seconded by Councillor Mann, and this includes the Essex County Council 106 requirements, the additional word on condition 3, which can be found on page 36, and informative that the hedge and trees on the frontage must be retained other than those that are going to be felled for access. Are we everybody happy with that? Nothing else?
I think there's informative about the sewers.
Oh, informative about the sewers. And how would you like this informative worded about the sewers?
I think.
No, do we have a general one?
Yeah, I think on the Anglian water, I think we just missed it in terms of the informative. There's some wording in the Anglian water recommendation, which I think Councillor Park was referring to, so we can lift the wording from the recommendation.
And a recommendation to Anglian Water regarding the sewers. All those in favour? Those against? That's everyone, no abstentions. So that application has been carried with all those additional conditions. It's informatives. We now come to the next application, which is application 5B, application 22000822 full Horizon 120 Business Park off the A131 London Road, Great Notley. This can be found on pages 49 to 79, and there's no speakers on this application, so we go straight to the presentation, which is going to be made by Alison. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Good evening, Chair, evening members.
Good evening.
This application I present to you this evening is in relation to the erection of an acoustic fence and associated landscaping at Horizon 120 Business Park.
The application is located inside the red line of the Horizon 120 Business Park, which is allocated as a strategic employment site in the adopted local plan and benefits from a local development order granted by the Council in 2021. The reason this has been submitted as a full application is fairly unusual because they usually come through the LDO process, but it's due to the fence of this nature not being included in the approved design code of the LDO, for which all development within the site has to comply with, so hence why this is a full application for this. The application site sits on the eastern boundary of the business park, with the A131 running north-south along the boundary. The acoustic fence would essentially enclose the service yard of Unit 1, which is this unit here, which is currently under construction for B8 use. It's not under operation yet. The purpose of the acoustic fence is to ensure that Unit 1 can have a 24-hour operation but still be in accordance with the approved noise report associated with the business park. Without the acoustic fence at this location proposed, the 24-hour operation of the unit would not be possible as the approved noise levels would be breached. The remainder of the Horizon 120 Business Park is 24-hour operation, so this would be the only unit that, if it was occupied next week, for example, would not be able to operate within those time frames. This just shows the view to the west of Unit 1, and essentially the fence would come all the way around the front here, and this is the existing tree belt here. The acoustic fence would be approximately 138 metres in length and 4.5 metres high, surrounded with soft landscaping. The longest stretch of acoustic fence fronting the A131 will generally be visibly obscured by existing and proposed soft landscaping, which is essentially this stretch here. However, the corner section of the fence, this stretch here, as you turn left into the business park from the A131, adjacent to GridServe, will be particularly exposed. The reason for this exposure is twofold. Firstly, due to the width of the verge and ability to plant trees on this corner section, and secondly, due to the required highway visibility display. Whilst there will be an element of tree planting on the corner closest to Unit 1 in this area here, there will essentially be a gap in the trees where the fence will be visible for approximately 20 metres. To add visual interest to this 20-metre stretch, low-lying shrubs and climber plants are proposed, along with a sign which will be positioned on the fence to celebrate the entrance. The details of the sign are still being developed and will come forward by way of condition, but this is the corner stretch here that you can see just here, and this is how big essentially the signage zone will be, but that will need to come forward as an advert consent for that particular area. But I do have an illustration of the corner and how that could potentially look with the sign on the side. This sign here, for example, that's been approved through the LDO compliance checklist for the public wayfinding and public arts area, but this one here would come forward separately. But you can essentially see the soft landscaping which would join up to the existing tree belt. Initially, when first planted, the soft landscaping will range in height from 1.5 to 4 metres when planted, but should grow to mirror the existing tree belt along the A131, which is already there. The species have been chosen for their screening and fast-growing properties. In terms of the planning balance, the principle of an acoustic fence within the LDO land to mitigate noise impacts from the business park to existing residents is accepted. The purpose of the acoustic fence for 24-hour operation of Unit 1, which would not be possible without the erection of an acoustic fence in this location proposed. Environmental health officers concluded that the proposed acoustic fence offers noise reduction to assist in achieving the approved noise criteria. It's generally considered that the introduction of a fence in this location with soft landscaping and screening will improve the visual amenity of this eastern boundary, given the visual prominence of the boundary along with the noise mitigation benefits. With appropriate landscaping and screening, the impact on visual amenity is considered acceptable. The soft and hard landscaping is of high quality and well considered, and it would have no detrimental impact on existing ecology, but would significantly enhance and increase biodiversity, with approximately 36 new trees being proposed. Given the nature of the development, there is not considered to be any detrimental visual impacts on existing residential amenity due to the proximity and the boundary tree planting between the residential properties on the other side of the A131. The erection of an acoustic fence and landscape screening would be a benefit to visual amenity when compared to the current state of the site, which is generally open and quite ugly, to say the least. In terms of the noise impacts, the nature of the acoustic fence, which seeks to protect such disturbance, would be considered as a benefit to residents. I just want to bring your attention to a rewording of Condition 7 in terms of the trigger points for commencement of the trigger point for the details of the signage to be submitted. It was essentially 6 months from date of decision, but the applicant has asked for it to be 6 months from the date of commencement, which we've considered was actually a reasonable request. Officers are therefore asked members to consider the officer recommendation of approval subject to the conditions outlined in the committee report and subsequent update of Condition 7. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Alison. Sorry, I'll just change it. It was 6 months from the commencement. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll put it back on the screen.
No, it's fine. I'm just changing this for me. Yeah. So I know what I'm doing. Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is in my ward, of which I am one of 3 representatives, and I think it's only right that when we've got development of this size and scale with a 24-hour operation, that we give due consideration to some neighbours who are merely 50 metres away from the development. As we can see from the presentation, you can clearly see the HGV docking station sheds, and if they are going to be in 24-hour use, then acoustic nuisance could become problematic for those residents who are the closest. Notwithstanding that, there's obviously the A130 in between the development and the properties. However, having said that, it's not for us to introduce more noise, but to reduce it where we can. Could I just ask, on that signage piece, would that be brought forward separately to include things like lighting? So would it be a lit sign? Would we be able to consider that at a later time, or do we need to consider that now as part of?
The signage is not being The signage is not being considered now. That will be a separate advert consent that will have to come forward because it's not included within the details of this application.
Super, thank you very much. I think the introduction of I think it was around 36 trees helped to return those that were removed as part of the original development, so really good on that basis there. And obviously, once it's installed, it will mellow and the trees will grow around it, so I think it will be a decent addition to that area around the development. So on that basis, Madam Chairman, I am happy to approve officer's recommendations for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. So you've moved it. Second. You're going to second it, Councillor Sweat. Do you wish to speak?
I do, Madam Chairman. Thank you. I'd just like to agree with Councillor Ricky on those comments as well. And I'd just like to say that I think this planning application come forward is very much in the spirit of the LDO, which I think is essential to maintain on this site. And I agree with the officer comment about the part that needs to be less planted because of the sight lines there, which I think is really important for safety factor. But I do welcome the additional trees and the overall effect that it's going to give to our LDO site. And I think this will continue to add all the biodiversity that we need on the site, but also actually encourage that whole biodiversity net gain across the site, and also at the same time reducing the sound for the sake of the noise across potential for the residents around in the area as well. So I'm very happy with that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Before I speak to this, could I ask a question, please? I'm a bit confused about whether anything's coming out. Paragraph 732 says nothing that's growing there now is coming out, but then condition 5 talks about trees to be removed, and there's also a bit about untidy scrub, which I hate that phrase anyway, because what is untidy scrub to us might not be to wildlife. Could you just clarify?
So everything that you can see on the site at the moment falls within the LGO red line, so all the clearing's already been done for this particular element. So everything that you can see there has already been cleared under the LDO. There is nothing more to be removed. So essentially, yes, there has been vegetation removed, not under this application though, under the LDO application. So there has been stuff removed. There's nothing further from what you can see in these photos to be removed. In terms of the condition, that's a standard condition that we don't like to touch really. And in terms of the scrub, where is that actually referred to? If you don't mind me asking.
Condition 5.
Oh, okay, so it's the same condition.
Bottom of page 58.
Oh. Page 58.
Overgrown scrub.
So I just refer to the eastern boundary of the Horizon Business Park is currently exposed with overgrown scrub and palisade fencing. It's just an observation, but there's nothing, just in terms of description of the site.
Thank you. So nothing's coming out on that belt that we can see on the photograph there, that's all staying?
That's all staying, yeah.
That's very helpful. So the only thing I wanted to then mention, two things to say. Obviously, given the visual impact of the development per se, more planting is good, so I totally support that. It was just a species mix, and I saw there was quite a lot of discussion between departments about what it would be. I'm quite and it would have been helpful, very subtle criticism, to have a table of all the trees in the reports, because you had to sort of look online to see what they all were. There's actually different layers of planting. So for members' benefit who haven't had a look online, there's a sort of an understory, and then there's the bigger trees. So I think when we were talking about 30-odd trees, those are the big ones, but there's more planting underneath. I think officers were hoping that the whole thing could be native, and I think for biodiversity benefit we would do that. So I'd like to make a suggestion if the movers are happy. One of the trees specified is silver lime. Well, we could have a native lime, small leaf lime, which is native to Essex, not just to the UK, but native to Essex. And I also saw there was quite a lot of discussion about Scots pine. I actually agree with the criticism of this. Scots pine is arguably native to parts of the UK. It's not that common in Essex. I don't think it's going to look that good. And Scots pine also, when it's mature, has very tall, exposed trunks with very little on the bottom bit, which is not going to give you your screening. I think we should, for those feature trees, stick with oak, with English oak. Yes, they might take a bit longer to grow, but they're a very robust big tree, very dense. So I would like to propose, if the movers are accepted, the Scots pine be replaced with oak and the silver lime be replaced with small leaf lime.
Can I just come back to that? Those discussions were had, and between the applicant, who is the council, and officers, both with ecology and our landscape consultants. Our landscape officer was in terms of the nativity of Scots pine, we've used this on a number of developments in Essex. So in terms of the argument of whether or not Scots pine was native, that is a conversation that is actually being taken away with place services in terms of ecology, place services, and our landscape architect, because we've used Scots pine on other developments. In terms of the oak, there is a cost association with that, and obviously they do take a lot longer in terms of the screening potential. We have got a very large, long acoustic barrier that needs to be screened, and that discussion was had in terms of replacing the Scots pine with oak. But I think it was a cost implication to the council of being able, and the ability to be able to source those oaks as well. But obviously that just to let you know, those conversations has been had. The discussion was that the pine, the Scots pine, was more appropriate for this particular application.
Well, I don't agree, because of the form Scots pine takes when it's mature, and it says in here the eventual height of these trees is 5 metres. Well, add 10 or 15 or even 20 metres to that, Scots pine get huge. And what you will end up, someone works with a tree for 40 years, what you will end up with is you won't have the screening effect of mature Scots pine that you would from oak. It's not difficult at all to source oak trees. I do it all the time. That's nonsense, sorry. And also, because I've already mentioned you have the 2 layers of planting, your understory planting with some good species in there, field maple, wild service hazel, they're going to give you early screening at that lower level to screen the fence. What we're talking about now are the trees which will be much bigger, which will be above the fence. So I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest this, and I think it would give a better effect in the long run.
You're quite right about Scots pines. They shoot up, all you see is a trunk, and if we get terrible winds, they snap.
Very vulnerable.
They're very vulnerable. Sorry, I have some. So I don't know what you can do about that, but I agree with Councillor Abbott. The Scots pines are not a good idea, but
they also tend to get wind blown and lean over.
Yeah, I suppose what we're looking at this evening is what the landscape mix that has been proposed. Is there a potential to request a landscaping condition for the mix to come forward?
Could I propose that we have it comes back for a discussion? Either that, or I just propose and see if it gets through as an amendment, because I just think it would improve it on both fronts. So we have small leaf line instead of silver line. There's just one type of line for another, but it's having a native. And instead of the Scots pine, we have oak trees, which I think could look just better and do more of what you wanted to do.
if oaks are too expensive, what about field maples? They grow very quickly and they're native.
Yeah, they're already in there, field maple. You could do.
Already got field maple.
Right, a few more then. Councillor Sway, you're waving to me.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was just wondering if we could make an amendment that would give the council the ability to swap out without having to come back.
I don't want it to come back.
Change of trees, i.e., a couple of additional silver birch or field maples or whatever, and take out the Scots pine,
yes.
but so that actually the council can get on and establish this.
Yes, I don't think we need. Well, it wouldn't be able to come back that quickly because I understand we've got some very hefty agendas between now and the 20th of December. So yeah, I can see that dragging on, which we don't want.
Sorry, the nature of this application is that the landscaping mix and proposal is all included within the approved plans condition. So it's not something that I can, for example, if we had a landscaping scheme condition that I could propose that we came in again to agree that. I know that the council does want to obviously erect this fence quite quickly. I'm not sure without deferring the application how we're going to do that. If
we can put forward an amendment that would change it.
Yeah.
Would change the condition, the decision. No, we change the plan, wouldn't
it's the approved plans. That's the point. It's condition 1. So all of the mix is actually in the approved plans, not by way of a condition. So you'd be improving you'd be changing the approved plans condition essentially, which is.
We could have a condition whereby we approve these plans with the exception of the Scots pines.
And the silver line.
And the silver line. And the silver line.
And then the details will be submitted to the council officers for approval.
Yes, and it will come to us. Yes, yes.
But we'll note your comments, Councillor Abbott, as informative.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the discharge of conditions, that will be taken into account. So it won't need to come back to planning committee. Officers will be aware when they discharge the condition, if that's okay. That's okay.
Councillor Ritchie, as the mover of the motion, would you like to change your?
Yeah, so happy to move officers' recommendations with that additional condition informative around.
It'll be a condition, not an informative.
Sorry, a condition around
thank you.
The change of tree.
Scots pines and a silver. Councillor Sri, are you happy with that?
Yes, I'll be very happy with that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right. Put that to the Councillor Johnson, so sorry. I'm confused with all these trees.
Right, it's like being back at home. Just wanted to ask a question, really, more than anything. What's the fence made of? Will it require any maintenance? What is it made of?
It's made of wood. It's a... Bear with me. It will essentially look the same as what you see in your garden in terms of a garden fence, kind of the featherboarded look. 4.5 metres in height. But there is a condition on to say that it's green. That is just the industry green because it's heat protected with copper. So you get little flecks of green, but there's only 2 colours available in this particular brand. So the brown is essentially very, very dark brown. We didn't think that would be acceptable for here, but it's essentially a wooden fence. Kind of looks the same as in your garden, but 4.5 metres in height.
So it's not a special acoustic material.
It's wider, so you won't. It's in terms of its thickness. So it's the appearance of it is like a fence, but the thickness makes it the acoustic elements.
Well, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this with a new condition to remove the Scots pine and the silver lime, and to the change of the words in condition 7, which state within we forget the 6 months. It's from commencement of development. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. That brings us to our final application this evening, and that's application 5C, application 22000938 out, Perkins Garages Limited, Dunmow Road, Rain. Can be found on pages 80 to 112, and I do have 2 speakers on this application. The first person to wish to make a statement is Mr. William Childs. He is an objector. Mr. Childs, would you like to come to the table? Sorry you've had a wait, but... Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm objecting to this planning application on the following grounds. No main sewers. Nearest sewer is half a mile away in the village of Rain. No septic tanks, reed beds would be needed. There's nothing on that plan at all as to what's going to happen to the sewage and where it's going to go. There is a covenant on part of the site for access to the septic tank outfall pipe, which runs 1 metre inside the hedge on Perkins land. This was registered by my grandparents, Charles and May Brown, when they sold their land, i.e. field. It is registered with the land registry. There is regular flooding of the B1256 outside Perkins. This water then floods Perkins and Sunnyfields land. Ongoing problem for the last 10 years. There is still no solution to this problem. Land drain runs through the site at the middle rear of the car park, not marked on the plan. This takes water away from the ditch from Broadfields Farm Industrial Estate and Sunnyfield. Any building could disrupt this drain. The site is outside the village envelope. As already stated, in a filed objection, landscaping has disappeared from the parking at the rear of the site. There should be trees and vegetation on either side of the hard standing for the car park, and this area should not have been turned over to more car parking, but it has, and the land has remained unmanaged, and only 1 tree survives on both sides, on both plots of land either side of the car parking. So housing and parking should not be built on these areas. See planning application 872146 of 1987. The hedge, which is on the right-hand side of Perkins, is ours. We would need access to cut it. Increased pressure on local services, hospital, education, etc. If you're building 20 houses, that's at least 40 people. There is already a gravel pit about to enter operation behind our property, Sunnyfield. Now housing. This is a rural area, supposedly. Finally, I would like to say that our family has always had good relations with all owners of the filling station, which now is a garage, since my grandparents sold the site field in the 1960s. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Giles. Thank you for coming to see us this evening. The next person wishing to make a statement is Councillor Miss Karen Spencer, and she's speaking on behalf of Rain Parish Council. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Rain Parish Council thanks you for giving us the opportunity to attend this evening in support of the Planning Officer's recommendation. We feel that this is another example of speculative development in our parish and that the application should be refused. The land proposed for development is not included within Section 2 of the local plan. The developers have not engaged with the local community at all. We invited them to attend the parish council meeting. They accepted the invitation, but they did not attend. As for the location, it is well documented that the road adjacent to the site has been the subject of severe flooding. On numerous occasions, the road has been impassable and the village has been cut off from the west. These floods have caused much disruption, not only to residents, but to all traffic in the area. For example, buses having to be rerouted and traffic being unable to access the A120. We were recently advised by Essex Highways that work had been undertaken to remedy this, but the road has still been flooded in the past couple of weeks. Historically, there have been numerous attempts to resolve the flooding situation. None have succeeded. This site is outside of the village envelope. The addition of 20 dwellings would be disproportionate to the existing residential development in the area, which currently consists of just 3 dwellings. It would massively increase the density of housing within the area. Currently, the 3 dwellings are interspersed between predominantly farmland and local businesses. The outline drawings also indicate that the proposed development will not be in keeping with the current properties in terms of height or scale. This addition of dwellings will visually alter the character as you approach the village from the west. Given that it's situated well outside of the village envelope, the infrastructure in this area is non-existent. There is no main sewage or gas in the vicinity. It's unsustainable in terms of access to local facilities, including school places, health services, shops and public transport. As you'll be aware, work has recently commenced on a gravel pit in the same area, and we already have concerns around large vehicles potentially accessing the site via Rain Village and using it as a cut-through. The proposed development causes similar concerns, lorries diverting through our village on country roads that are not able to safely accommodate HGVs. And lastly, we'd mention that the site is adjacent to Stane Street, a Roman road, which has already yielded artefacts and human remains at the aforementioned gravel extraction site. We are gratified to note that the archaeological specialists have requested that a survey be carried out on this location also. The Parish Council hopes that members of the committee will heed the Planning Officer's recommendations for refusal of this application. Thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Thank you very much indeed. And that brings us to the end of people wishing to make a statement. So I go to Janine for the presentation. Good evening. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you. Outline planning permission is sought to construct 20 dwellings with permission for only access and layout within this application, with scale, appearance and landscaping reserved for future consideration. The site is located outside of the village envelope to the east of Rain. It is a brownfield site forming part of the countryside. Residential properties in Dunmow Road are to the east and west, and one property is located to the south. To the northeastern boundary of the site is Broadfields Industrial Estate. The existing site is currently occupied by a garage showroom and servicing and storage and parking to the rear of the site. The site and development are not in an area of allocated or intended use for housing growth. The principle of residential development of this scale in this location is not supported. The site is not allocated for employment purposes in the adopted local plan. However, it is being used currently for employment, and officers consider that whilst the applicant has considered various options, the site is occupied and has not been marketed to explore any alternative commercial uses which could be appropriate for this site. The overall layout within the countryside results in an urban pattern of development out of keeping with its surroundings. The layout is dominated by hard-standing dwellings having little setback from the roadside. The location of parking courts and remote parking is divorced from the housing. it should serve. The overall layout has resulted in a number of dwellings set with little separation from the new road proposed. Properties fronting Dunmow Road project in front of the existing building line, exacerbating the prominence of this new development to the detriment of the character and appearance of the area. It's not been clearly demonstrated that 20 dwellings can be accommodated on site with the level of on-site public open space required, together with the provision of trees. The layout compromises amenity, resulting in properties that would overlook private gardens, and fails to provide sufficient back-to-back distances to mitigate against overlooking or loss of privacy. In addition, a number of the properties would result in outlook for many dwellings facing exposed car parking areas or brick walls of adjacent properties, which is not acceptable design. Whilst the scale and appearance has been reserved for future consideration, the indicative elevation or design as shown is considered to be poor, lacks articulation, and fails to create an appropriate high-quality sense of place. The proposal would result in overdevelopment of the site without complying with the relevant design requirements and standards. In addition, the application is unacceptable on highway grounds, where Essex County Council highways have objected to the proposal, whereby the vehicle access, there has been insufficient information provided to demonstrate it has the highway capacity or it would not have a detrimental impact onto safety. Furthermore, the Environment Agency have raised a holding objection given that insufficient information has been submitted in relation to the risk of pollution to controlled waters. In addition, there is an objection that insufficient information has been submitted in relation to sustainable urban drainage systems to make a formal assessment. The following photos provide context. This is the front of the site, east of the site, west, opposite to the west, whereby there's a bus stop located. Looking to the eastern boundary towards the residential property, the eastern elevation of the existing building, to the rear and eastern boundary, whereby the industrial estate, so this location, the western boundary of the site. This is looking back towards the rear elevation of the property, and the western boundary. In terms of the adverse impacts of the proposal, it's outside of a settlement boundary within the countryside, poor location to services, harm to the character and appearance of the area by reason of overdevelopment, site scale pattern of development, impact on residential amenity in terms of unacceptable standard of residential amenity for limited separation distances, dwellings overlooking, light, noise and emissions, fails to demonstrate a safe vehicle access onto Dunmow Road, insufficient information in relation to sustainable urban drainage systems, and the risk of pollution to controlled waters. There's a lack of a Section 106 agreement, delivery of affordable housing, ecology and RAMS payments. The benefits are the delivery of market and affordable housing, and obviously during the construction. Just an update to reason 4. In light of the Environment Agency's comments in relation to the risk, insufficient information has been provided in relation to an assessment of the pollution to controlled waters. As highlighted in red, we would like to update reason 4 as the reason for refusal. To conclude, we believe that the application should be refused given its location to services, the countryside, impact on residential amenity, character and appearance of the area. It fails to demonstrate a safe vehicle access, insufficient information has been provided in relation to sustainable urban drainage systems and risk of pollution to controlled waters, and the proposal would lack obligations and also, in addition, the RAMS payment and delivery of an affordable housing mix in meeting housing needs. We therefore conclude the harm arising from the conflict with the development plan such that planning permission should be refused in line with the development plan.
Thank you very much, Janine. Thank you. Members, Councillor Mrs Beavis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to make this very brief because I think it is a comprehensive, thanks Councillor Johnson, report. And I just wanted to also thank Rain Parish Council this evening, because I just think it brings it to life actually quite often, you know, reading stuff in reports, but I think it just helps to bring it to life. I'm happy to move officers' recommendations to refuse this. I mean, I am jolly concerned, and everybody else around the table is, about the 5-year supply, and that, you know, clearly this could go for an appeal. I think the fact that Essex County Council aren't supporting actually is probably quite helpful in this regard. So nothing else to add. I'm more than happy to listen to other members around the table, but I will move officers' recommendations. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. And that's with the change in condition 4.
Indeed.
Yes. There's a vote a seconder. Councillor Mrs Spray.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And all I'm going to add is that generally, when we have an officer recommendation for refusal, there's sometimes 2, maybe 3 reasons for refusal. We've got 6 here, yes. 6 really strong reasons for refusal, which pretty much sums it up, actually. So, thank you. Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to add anything further? No. Sorry.
Yes, clearly, I think there is a long list of reasons for refusal. I'm very concerned about this. There's definitely overdevelopment of the site, but anything else. There's also an awful lot of missing information, and which is possible for us to make any decisions without that information being there. So I'm happy to. I shall not be supporting this application. Thank you.
Well, it has been moved by Councillor Mrs Beavers, seconded by Councillor Mrs Spray, with the change in condition 4 on page 110. All those in favour of refusal? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, members, and thank you very much for coming. And that brings us to the end of our meeting. I have no urgent business this evening, and see you all in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.